Today on the Cameron Journal podcast, we are joined by Sid Mohasseb, and I've got his details here. He's the Adjunct Professor of Data Science and Operations at University of California, Marshall. He's chairman of the board of Anabasis Incorporated, and we are going to talk all about business and things that affect corporate revenue and profit and why leadership matters in a corporate setting and why that can make or break any business, which I entirely agree with. We've had many guests on this like this before. So if you're one of my listeners who doesn't love the business stuff, I'll see you next week. But for everybody else who loves business stuff and talking about business and factors in success, stick around because I know Sid's going to have some fascinating stuff to say. So, welcome to the Cameron Journal podcast.
Great to be here with you, Cameron. And hold off, don't leave yet. The stuff we'll talk about has to do with your life too. You are an entrepreneur, and I'll tell you why, regardless of if you're working somewhere or you're not thinking about business.
Well, that's an excellent thought. So, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and we'll start from there.
Sure. Me, I started my first business when I was in college. Then had about I'm going to give you the 25 cents tour because of your of the time constraints and people's patience. I did for about 10 years. I was partner of a consulting firm. I became a partner of a consulting firm and had very large clients, Fortune 500, the Motorola, IBM, Federal Reserve Bank, and so forth. Then started my own firm and did a lot of turnarounds. That means buying companies and selling them. Then I started five companies in the 90s. Sold some of them. One of them didn't work. Then one of the companies that I started took me overseas. We had offices in Shanghai, Hong Kong, and Europe, and in US. Sold that company and became an angel investor. So I made investments in early stage companies. Started a venture capital firm, and then one of the companies that I was an investor in, I jumped in to take it to an exit or selling the company. I sold it to KPMG, which is a $26 billion advisory and accounting firm, and I became the head of strategic innovation for their strategy group. Uh, for the past 6 or 7 years, I've been out. I have two books written, probably about, I don't know, 100 articles because I'm old and opinionated. And I, as you said, I teach both in Marshall Business School. I teach strategy, and I also teach in the engineering school at USC, University of Southern California. And I still do investments in early stage stuff and work with lots of entrepreneurs and students and people who care about discovering their next best version.
Well, that's absolutely fascinating. So let's dive into, some of these ideas around, you know, leadership and all this type of thing in your notes ahead of time. You mentioned the five pillars of organization. Why don't
Hmm.
we front load and talk about those now while we still have
Sure,
people's attention?
sure, sure. So I have based on you heard me tell you about my journey, and I have a lot of scars and failures and successes that has taught me a few things, and one of them is that we all have reasons to be satisfied, and whether we are in business or whether in our personal life. And what that does is those reasons are what drives our growth, our ability to change and evolve, and they're the same reasons that help a company be successful and a leader to lead well. If you look at a company, you mentioned the five pillars. If you look at any company, it doesn't matter if it's a donut shop or if it's Microsoft, it operates on five pillars: the customers, the employees, the partners they work with in supply chain or however, the investors, which could be the owner, and the society or the community that they operate within. Uh, let's take the first one, which everybody says customer is king, customer is important. Here's a question. If you have a business, do you think that you sell or they buy? Who has the decision to give you the money? You don't have the decision to take money from people.
No, no, that's up to them.
So they have a certain of reasons, certain kind of reasons that they decide that, hey, I like Cameron, or I like this company, I like Apple, I like Microsoft, I like Samsung, I like Tesla, or I don't like it. And for that particular set of reasons, they decide to reach into their pockets and give you a dollar. They're based on their own reason. Based on their own reason. Let's take employees. We think we give people a job offer, but in reality, they accept the offer, which is they know on the back of their head, are they going to be thinking about what you want to do in 3 o'clock in the morning? Or are they going to turn things off when they go home? Or they took this job because, they needed to pay the rent? Or, oh, you got good insurance, I've got a sick kid, or because you're close, or they have 1,000 reasons to accept it. You accept productivity, but they define what productivity is or is not. The same thing applies to your partners or investors and the society you live in. There is an exchange. This exchange is of value and decisions based on certain reasons. If you discover the reason, you have a good business. You
Hmm.
have to focus on. So it's not like you have a company and you say, "Hey, let's go build the culture." That doesn't work that way. I don't care how many hamburger settings you have or barbecues you have on Fourth of July. That's not people. That doesn't connect people and build a culture. It's because you have a harmonized reasons between the people who work there. They have a similar set of thinking, feeling, reasoning that they're affiliated with you. Is it maybe growth? Is it maybe creativity? Is it maybe whatever it is? So if you figure those reasons, you will have a good business. But these reasons are always changing, Cameron. That is, the employees today are not the same people that they were before. So you may say, "Oh, my audience or target audience is people between 25 and 45," but they're not the same 25 and 45 that they were 5 years ago. These are different people. They expect
No.
different things because
Yeah.
the world is changing. Everything in the world is changing. So the role of a leader becomes one of harmonizing. That is all of this stuff. Because if I take away from my customer and I give him less, I can charge him more and give my employees a little more money. I can make more and give my investor a little more money. I can be someone who doesn't care about the environment, mess up the society that I'm in, but hey, I'm making money. So the role of a leader in this case is one of harmonizing, someone that knows what these understands these reasonings and always is harmonizing all these pillars, kind of like running a symphony, conducting a symphony that's got ebbs and flows and ups and downs. So that's a different way of looking at leadership, uh, and I can almost guarantee you, if you figure out the reasons, you're going to have a good business.
No, I mean that makes a lot of sense. It sounds very neat and tidy. Um, which always I always get concerned when things are too neat and too tidy. Um, because the reality is, I mean, I appreciate everything you said and I agree with everything you said, but there's a lot of, I feel like, other factors at play. When it comes to employee wages and inequality, that's been dismal for years. Um,
Who has made it dismal? No, the
I'm
fact
sorry.
is, so the question is, you're absolutely right. It's
Yeah,
night and tidy because not because what's out there, but because how it should work.
right.
That doesn't mean that it does work like that. If at the same day Elon Musk goes to court and claims that he deserves a $56 billion bonus, And on the same day, he lays off 10% of the company. That's just
Right.
breaking the spirit of being this harmonizer. It's not a harmonizer. So the fact
Yeah.
that you see the cracks and you see the issues is not necessarily a factor that this is a good leader or a bad leader. I mean, we have a society that a lot of things. If somebody is pushing through and is an a-hole and a decisive, that's a good leader. That's not necessarily a good leader. He may get some results, but it's ebbs and flows. That's why you see 85% of the companies on the S&P 500 that 67 years ago were the greatest companies. 85% of those 500 are not there anymore. What happened to them? They turned stupid? No. They started being addicted to the sameness of their behavior, ignored the balance and the harmony of things. And
Yeah.
that's, I guess, what I've learned is what we have confused over the years, which is not what America was based on. It was based on value, and this is not capitalism that we're practicing. This is elitism.
Yeah.
Not capitalism. Capitalism never says, "Oh, you got to go screw those people." That's nonsense. That's irrelevant. It's been tainted with some stuff that's not true.
I mean, yes. I mean that definitely is kind of where I was, where I
Yeah,
was going with
and
that.
you're right.
But then I guess the significant question, and I've asked this many times of people, how do we change it? What are we going to do here? Because what we have going is not sustainable. I
Excellent.
think it's already starting to, the cracks are obvious, but it's starting to not work in material ways. I mean, 10 years ago, the cracks were there, but things still worked, so nobody cared. Now the cracks are there and things are not working.
So,
How do we
Cameron,
fix this?
excellent question. So, excellent question. This is exactly what we should ask. So, first of all, I call it uh, like a diabetics problem. My
Mm,
mother-in-law has had diabetes, and she kind of ate everything and didn't care about things until one day she had a problem with her toe, which turned black and blue. And now they had to cut it off. And then, if it would stay, it would get worse. So sometimes exposing the cracks would get us into a situation that we're saying says, hey, the cracks are exposed. It ain't working. We were fooling ourselves because it was comfortable. The sameness was comfortable. So the first thing is like, if you're an alcoholic, the first thing is to admit that we're an alcoholic. Otherwise,
right.
you don't recover. Okay, so there are cracks. It ain't working. This is not capitalism. This is not what we signed up for. This divide. The second is realizing that we, meaning you and I and all of your audiences, have this thing in our genes that's not just to survive, but to thrive. That is, we have a choice. We have a choice. And change is our best friend because it gives us options. Without change, we have no options. Say, imagine it was every day was the same for you. Every day, 72 degrees. You had Wendy's for lunch, McDonald's for dinner, and your kid was 5 years old, and he was always 5 years old. Can you imagine that world? That's a horrible world. Now,
Yeah.
if there was change, it would give you options, and now you have choice. So this idea that we have to realize that we have choices, we can change, and if we don't actually, we don't have any options.
No, I mean, this is one of the things I've been talking about for many, many years. I said part of the reason why people are so politically frustrated is we have been living in what I call corporate statism for a long time. And when you have the level of corporate capture of government that we have had, and will have even more so in the next administration, although both parties are equally guilty of it, um, then the frustration comes from the fact that things don't change, things don't move. You end up being stuck in these ruts, and people keep voting, hoping something will change it, shift it, solve the problems, not realizing they're actually fighting against large moneyed interests who are very invested in
So
making sure this system never changes.
yeah. So let's get into the politics of it. So as long as we're spending $16 billion, billion with a B, imagine how many people can be helped with this. Imagine how many hungry people can be fed. We spent $16 billion in our recent election. Now,
Yeah.
who gets if you want to become I'm in California. If you were going to become a senator in California, you have to pay about $100 million. Now, I don't call that government of the people for the people. Which people? Do you have $100 million to spend on an election? Maybe you win, maybe you lose. Hey, that's not people. Okay? So,
No.
and if somebody gives you 100 million people, is it because you're cute? Why would they give it to you? They have no interest. They're just philanthropic people sitting there giving you money just because.
No, they're
Oh,
buying
nonsense.
policy outcomes. At that level of money, I
Everybody,
mean, 15, $20, they like you. 15 to 20, million, they have an interest. It's return on
absolutely.
investment.
And it's
Like,
those big monies that are driving things. So you're absolutely right. We choose these people because of what they say, because we think we don't have a choice. So my mission in life is, and you say, what do I do? My mission in life, I've done my business, and I'm starting an academy that's again centered around this same idea. My mission in life is, Cameron, you have a choice. We have a choice. And if we collectively imagine and we collectively act and decide, we can change things because we have done it over the past 500,000 years. Because it's in your genes to thrive. It's not in your genes to rot in a hole. All of us, all of us have in our genes to take what we have, our situation, and exchange it with something better. We could do that, and we deserve
absolutely.
it.
No, no,
But the first
yeah.
thing is, and people they say, how do I do that? And I'll give you a very simple test. Yeah, I have a tendency of simplifying things because I think at the core things are simple. We make them complicated. We make them
Yeah.
very, very complicated. I'll give you a very simple exercise. The next time you're going to go to the grocery store, stop at your door and decide, do I turn a left or do I turn a right? Do I go to Ralph's or do I go to Safeway or do I go to Albertson? Make a decision. You could take the long way home. You could make a right or you could make a left. You could walk. You could take a bike. You could run. You have lots and lots of choices. If you realize that you have those choices and you're making that choice, slowly you would realize that you're making hundreds of choices a day. Hundreds and hundreds of choices a day. You are fully capable of making choices. If they're taking it away and we think we don't have choices, it ain't their fault. It's our fault. So as long as I say, if I drink, I'm the drunk. It's not the manufacturers of the booze. Yeah, they like to make money off of me. But I gotta stand up. And if I realize I have a choice, then a lot could happen. And
But
what I'm
fewer
saying
choices
about the
than we
pillars
used to
of
be. I
business,
mean, grocery is an area where we have a handful of companies that own a significant portion of the market. Not quite the choices we used to have. Fewer and fewer these days.
so I have a book. It's called The Caterpillar's Edge, and the analogy in this book is a caterpillar has 7,000 muscles in it, Cameron. And it takes multiple stages. In some caterpillars in Amazon, it takes 14 years before they become a butterfly. And a butterfly is an entirely different species than a caterpillar. Now, life is not like IKEA, take A, attach B, and voila, you have a bookcase or something. It takes time. It's not like flipping a switch of light and saying, "Oh, I decided this is bad, so I have a choice that yeah, we support the ones that we think are better. We make choices, and slowly we can turn a caterpillar into a butterfly. But if we never start, we will never get there. If we never start, you will never get there unless you're in the playing field. You will never have a home run. You will never even catch a ball.
No, I mean it's helpful to definitely start places. I think there's excellent examples of where people have made their voices heard and radically affected things. The whole Dylan Mulvaney Bud Light scandal was probably one of the most effective pieces of boycotting ever. And it was, I mean, feel what you will about that situation. As a narrative, as a people saying, no, we're not going to support you because of this, you can't really do much better. I mean,
Yeah.
it was
I
huge.
agree. There is a collective action that makes sense. But what I'm suggesting is not an uprising of any sort. I'm saying the business doesn't work, you think? Okay, start making it work. I'm telling you, find the reasons of the people and find this, and don't do the same thing that the other do. Don't be a bamboozler. Don't start the business, and don't be like the ones that are bad.
Yeah.
You
Well, I
have a
mean, how
choice.
many times has an outside player come in and been super disruptive just because they weren't awful to deal with, sort of thing. Um, and especially, in a B2C situation, it's incredibly easy to be disruptive simply by improving the interface, the interaction, how people do things, how easy it is to do business with you, all this type of thing. That's 90% of people's complaints.
Yeah.
And so if you can pull that off, hell's bells.
Uh, Again, if you are unsatisfied with how a business does work, and you have a job at the front line, or you're a manager, or wherever you sit, from tomorrow morning, if there's 10,000 or 100,000 people in an organization, then they start behaving like human beings, like value matters, like customers matter, like employees matter. Like, start doing that with your friend to the right and friend to the left and your employees on the top and the bottom. If we all begin to behave that way, we can't blame somebody else, this corporate evil. Now we can. Now they've turned this into elitism, where it's a where it's a pyramid upside down, and these guys sit over here, and everybody else is down here, and we say, "Oh, we don't have a choice." We are under the illusion that we don't have a choice. We do have a choice. We have a choice every day of how we behave. We have a
But
choice
I mean,
every.
but I think it's also difficult to tell people, the everyday working person for an hourly wage to make different better decisions when they're stuck in systems and with people in situations that are never going to really support that.
So what is your alternative? To stay in the rut? I don't know any other
I mean,
alternative.
for
There
me
is not going to
personally,
be a
no, I've
savior.
never been that person. I've always been well, I might be the only one doing this, but I think it's important, so I'm going to do it. But the reality is sometimes that behavior gets punished. People get mad at you because you're showing them up, you're making everyone else look bad, all this sort of thing, and then suddenly you're socially ostracized. And let's face it, 90% of being successful in a corporate environment or an office environment is how much people like you. And if they don't like you, you won't last very long.
So you see, here's the thing. I should we wait for the savior to come in from another planet or another place and wave a magic wand, or should we be accepting of? I mean, if you tell me, hey, this is what it is, then let's be satisfied. Let's be happy. Why are we unhappy? Let's be satisfied because okay, this is what it is, then it is what it is. Then, hey, let's put a little concrete in those cracks you talked about
Yeah.
and, spit them together and it's fine. So it's fine. And what happens is over time we become, a different animal. And that's fine. If we all collectively decide to go that way, that is a solution. But I don't think that's the way to go.
No, I mean I get that. I think that's the natural response to the everyday person who is going to work because they need to exist in this country,
Yeah.
sort of thing. They're probably not that invested. They're probably not that engaged, nor do they want to be. They have many other things to think and worry about. And so I just kind of think of that, kind of is the natural reaction and how, people would not necessarily, want to engage. Kind of return to the idea that, the fish rots from the head. If you want, in my opinion, if you really want business culture in this country to change and get out of the Jack Welch Lee Iacocca shareholderism that we have been living under for 45 years, in my mind, that starts at the top. It's not the
Well,
barista
all
at
right, I
handing you the
agree
coffee
with
at
you.
Starbucks.
Let's say I agree with you. Who should get on the top? There's people, the
Yeah.
young people, you should be on the top. Okay, so then you have to behave that way, and you guys get on the top. But you have to realize that you have a choice to change what you have with something better first from here, and then from here, and then a little bit from here, and then you're on the top, and then you can change it and not forget that, hey, when you get to the top, screw everybody else at the bottom. But somehow nobody comes in and says, okay, here's five people selected from the Mars. We brought them here. Whoever gets on the top now and their sons and daughters who behave the same way, and the people, okay, the domino effect somehow has to be stopped. And what I believe is that every one of us, every one of those people that you say are not able to do it, they are able to do it. They just have to believe that they can because it's been done before.
Well, I mean, certainly, when you have, I mean, I think we see this a little bit in the return to office mandates and the hybrid and work from home situation right now. Ever since the pandemic, schedule flexibility and or full-time remote has been very popular for a variety of reasons. For workers, you're saving on commuting costs. Um, it's easier to figure out childcare, all this type of thing. And companies have been very resistant to letting those arrangements continue. And you've had
Do
some
you
big
know why,
players
Cameron?
try
I'll
to
tell you
force
why.
people back into the office. But interestingly enough, people have really started to make that sacrifice and say, no, if you force me to do this, I'm going to go find someone who isn't. And it's been kind of a miracle because you don't see that sort of unconscious solidarity in the American workforce
Yeah,
that often. But people, that's a hill people are willing to die on.
yeah,
They're willing to
Cameron.
risk not being able to pay their bills in order to keep that. And I think that's very interesting. I think it shows how valuable it is. And I think companies that get flexible work schedules right are going to win all day and night because you'll get the best people, you
So,
know.
Cameron, I am on a board of a few companies, and I have seen this thing in real time and real, and I've been on the side of people's flexibility you know the problem is, when people begin to work two, three places and they
Right.
violate it is those criminals, those people who violate the trust. No company wants to be policing every movement of every mouse. It's just, yeah, they don't want to pay for the space. It is ludicrous. It's too much. Who wants you to be driving 3 hours and get to work tired and frustrated and thinking about your kid? Nobody wants that. It is those people who, and they think they're smart. Hey,
Right.
I'm getting too sad. So if you're one of those people, don't, you're messing it up for the rest of us.
No, that is I mean, that's a very real concern. No, no, that's a very real concern. That's a real thing. But I think the number of people doing that sort of job stacking thing is incredibly small compared to the number of people that, would just like to be able to not, be commuting for an hour and a
Would you
half.
say that the minority, the majority of the people would not stop at a stop sign or a red light? No, the majority of
No.
the people are concerned, but we have red lights at the corner of every every road because some don't.
Right, but let's face it, a lot of those things work and accidents are reduced because people follow them even when nobody is looking, the
Yeah,
vast majority of the time.
that's
And
what I'm
therefore
saying.
then our,
That
our
we
our real problem then is just enforcing among those people who don't. Therein lies the
and that
problem.
who would enforce it? That would be you who's sitting next to the guy and saying, "Hey, this is not good. You're messing it up for me." Not say, "Oh, that's a great idea. Let me go do it too." Isn't that right? Let's stick it to the companies. And what happens is we've turned these companies into policing nations that are trying to either force you back to this or police you with mouse movements and eye movement. I mean, some of these things are absolutely crazy in terms of technologies that we're
Yeah, I
sitting
mean
in.
it
And I
the
mean, this is what, who would need this? This wasn't
yeah.
there, and people. So here's the problem. The problem is it's a collective solution that we have to be together, not just by standing against. We're not going to go to work, or thinking that if we don't go to work and we're working two things, we're hurting the man somehow. Well, we're hurting ourselves. Let's be better. Let's do better. Let's be the ones who are under leadership. If you believe this and you were leading a company, you would have a much more flexible environment than some other people who don't. Okay, let's go. Now, is it
Yeah,
is it
well, yes, but
hard?
let's
You
face it,
bet it
people
is
like me do
hard.
not generally end up leading companies. So,
No. I mean, it's your choice. I'm not saying everybody is leading companies. What I'm saying is a caterpillar goes into stages of life to become a butterfly. It doesn't happen overnight. There are 7,000 muscles that have to work together and change over time. It's a choice, and yeah, some people would not necessarily be leaders, and some people would be followers, and some people would be customers, and some people would be employees. We're all in this mess together. If we realize that we have a choice, then we can. I don't see any alternative. I'm all ears. If you have connections to people in Mars or Jupiter, and you can get them in, and they're better,
no, no, I mean,
let's
I
call
no, I
them
mean,
in,
I
brother.
get that. No, I mean, I get that it is all up to us to do these things and make these changes. I've always said there is no problem too big we cannot solve. We merely lack the political will to do so. Um, that is, I've been on that for 10 years. But I also realize that we have but I'm also a big fan of systems and containers. And I also realize the container we have created is an every man for himself, individualistic, dog eat dog situation.
That's
And
what
so
we've created.
if people can find a way to step on five other crabs to get out of the crab bucket, they 110% will. And I look at that situation and say, the only way to stop that from happening is to get all the crabs out of the bucket. You got to eliminate the bucket. And I think that and that's a much bigger, different systemic conversation than just blaming the crabs for how they are or not getting out of the bucket.
Cameron, see what we have done. Over the past 10,000 years, we've created fire, we've done math, we've done clothing, we've gone to the moon, we've done a lot. We've done a lot of lots of innovation and creativity. I mean, look how we're talking thousands of miles away, and we're having a conversation in a matter of sub-seconds translation. It's We have the ability to change it. But we are told that the crab is, you can't get the bucket changed. We're told, we're under this illusion. It's like the mouse in a thing, and they think that's their life, and then we can't. And here's an example I give you. I said, think outside of the box. What box? Who draw this box? Why should I think outside of the box? There is no box. You can think anywhere you want. Think outside of the box. Who drew this box? We drew it. The company
Yeah.
drew it. Other people drew it. I didn't. I
No,
don't
no,
have a box.
as someone who has always and forever been an outsider, I've always been that person who has oftentimes said the same thing. Um, I have to say that's never gone that well for me. I've never necessarily, you know, made a lot of money or been very employable and like that because I always did stuff out of the norm and out of the mainstream. I started as a freelancer doing business writing, resumes and speeches and press releases and all this type of thing. I got to work all over the world with people on almost every continent in doing all of that, and that was all wonderful, great, fantastic experience that I loved and I cherish to this day and all this type of thing. Unfortunately, it never really translated into anything else, and so I ended up just kind of always being an outsider and all this type of thing. And all of that to say, being an outsider can be fun and interesting, and it gives you options and different ways of working and doing, and it's why the reason why this show exists and all this sort of thing. But it also there's also a lot of sacrifice in that as well. Like, pretty much all of my friends are doing better in life than I am.
So
And that's just, I just have to live with that sort of thing. That's the price to pay for living the way that I have. And that's okay. I've come to terms with that. But I think that's not for everybody. Like,
So
I'm just
first
gonna
of
say
all,
that's
not
not
having,
the life everybody necessarily
good.
wants to live and
I
pursue.
I get it. So first of all, the fact that I'm saying that you don't have a box to imagine outside of it doesn't mean necessarily that I have to be a rebel. That's for one thing. That's not what I said. But it's okay. Your choice is to be an outsider, and that's perfect. Let me my question is it better to be satisfied or successful? Successful is what the society imposes on you. If you are a lawyer, if you are an attorney, if you are a doctor, if you are rich, if you then you're successful. Does that bring you satisfaction? No. Satisfaction is in your mind. You decide what satisfies you. And if what you've done has satisfied you, you are a success in my book. Now, your friends may have been satisfied with money. They may have been satisfied with 1,000 other things, but they may not have been. They may be doctors who never experienced all these people that you have talked to, never experienced the enjoyment that you have had. If you're not satisfied, then change to be satisfied. Change the definition of satisfaction so you get to satisfied. Obviously, because you have followed this rule and you have been an outsider and you've tried to do this stuff, you've been satisfied. Good for you.
Well, I
Who's
mean,
there
not
to
no,
judge
I mean,
you?
but not, I mean, not necessarily. Just because someone is an outsider and a Maverick and doing their own thing doesn't necessarily mean that's what they chose. And I recently
So,
went through this when I left my MFA. I was planning on kind of people don't know this. We're going to reveal the sauce today. I was planning on backburnering the publication and the show. I wanted to go to Harvard and write another book and pursue, literary academia and all this type of thing. That's where I was going to. And I applied to the American Library in Paris and Berlin and all this sort of stuff. And none of it came of it. So I was stuck back here doing this. And even though I love this, and today I've had two really great conversations, I've talked to you. This is fantastic. I did a recording earlier with a lady from China who wrote a book about her childhood, and it was absolutely fascinating, and I loved it. The unfortunate reality is, while this is really cool, and I, do get some enjoyment out of doing it, it sucks to be 36 years old and still living like a college student. I have friends who are, buying houses, going on vacations, all this type of thing. That stuff is just not usually possible with the type of weird asymmetrical life that I've lived. The money's just kind of not there. And I'm not saying that that's the end of the world or whatever, how the value of this is invalidated, but it is really easy to feel behind
it is
in that
easy.
way. And I know many other people have kind of been stuck in the same situation, even people that do have jobs and are able to do that, they nothing ever really terribly happens. It's struggle to get ahead, all this sort of thing. And so I think and that can be for a variety of reasons, from people just being terrible to people, not being liked enough or playing the game enough within the office, make people happy enough to get people to really value and support them, or being able to find a company willing to pay them what they're worth. There's all these different factors that we can broadly talk about, but can be as individuals the people that affect them.
Yes,
And I'm saying all of that. All I'm saying is I agree with you, but context matters a
absolutely.
lot. Like,
Absolutely. Context matters. And here's the thing. We're all unique. We're all different. I'm short. You're tall. This guy is black, and even two black people, two white people, two women. We experience life differently. We have different friends, different toys, different yards, different. We're all different, and yeah, we decide on some choices. And here's the thing. I would love to be a basketball player and play with LeBron James, but I'm 5'3". So
but I mean,
that's the reality of the
but here's the
situation. My
difference: is it's a
father is
lot
not
easier.
John F. Kennedy. These are facts of life. Either I try to be a victim of all of this stuff, or I choose and I say, "Hey, I'm doing." Now, here's
It's a lot easier to
you
say,
didn't get
okay, I
into
don't
Harvard.
necessarily get to
Plan
pursue
to
a career in
be
professional basketball, but it's a lot harder to say, I've been shut out of the economy and I can't afford housing, I can't afford healthcare, I can't afford transportation. Those are two very different
correct.
conversations.
But if you had decided, so it is if you had decided to be something different, like all of those other friends. And you have seen a lot of people around you, I'm sure, that are not themselves. They are freaking in the system because you have chosen to be somebody else. If you had, and even tomorrow, you clean up, you put a tie on, and let's go get you a job at XYZ and Associates as a salesperson. And you go bullshit every day and try to sell stuff. Of course, you can make money. You're a very competent, capable man. But you've decided to be satisfied as opposed to be measured by the success of the others. That's your choice. And it's a great choice. There's nothing wrong with it. So, what I'm trying to say is a lot of us, we are in a position, and then we have these metrics and measurements that are imposed to others. And then we try to measure ourselves against this stuff and know, oh, I want to be this, and I was satisfied, but I don't have that. Of course, if I wanted to do that, then I would not be me, I would be somebody else. You are you
I mean,
because you
yes.
are you.
Yes and no. I mean, there are different. I mean, I think in what there's a lot of factors that factor into what choices that you have. I have a friend right now who works in healthcare, and he's always at a job doing something. Unlike me, he's employable. I'm terminally unemployable. He's employable, and he's kind of run into a barrier where he can't go any higher without getting a bachelor's degree, which he's never gotten along the way. And it's really kind of making the choices before him very difficult, sort of
Yeah,
thing. And I'm kind of like, well, if you really think that's the final barrier, then I suggest, getting in a 2.5, 3 year program and
yeah,
knocking that out, and that will give you more options, and perhaps that will be better down the road. And it's just a matter of getting about it and getting done with it.
yeah.
Um, sort of thing. But I also feel like there's a lot of people in those, but there's even with that, there's a lot of logistics to that in terms of, how you're going to pay for it, student debt, all this type of thing. Lots
Yeah,
to think about there, lots of
yeah.
decisions to make there, sort of thing. And I think it's that stuff, that's the stuff that I think about, and that's the stuff where I say, I want to live in a society where no matter what happens in your life, there's sort of a minimum floor beneath which you do not fall. And I think a lot of life happens very quickly, and we should ensure sort of a minimum standard of living that people just simply don't fall below.
I completely agree. Let's go build it. Nobody is going to come in and give it to you and I. That's my point. Nobody, nobody that you set the fish rods from the top. These guys
Yeah,
are getting $100 million to get into office to screw the other guys, the smaller guys. It is what it is. But unless we entangle this, it wouldn't work. So my point is decisions have consequences. We have choices, but making those choices, okay, your friend is now okay, let's he should get a thing. Do you trust somebody who doesn't have a degree to be in a healthcare position when you're sick on that table and giving you the stuff? No, you want somebody who has the education to be able to do. Yeah,
right.
do I feel for the guy? Absolutely. Do I want him to do better? But he made some choices. Okay, so now make that choice, fix it up, let's go. But we
Yeah, I
don't
mean,
want to
in my mind,
realize the
those
choices
things,
that.
in my mind, those things are easier. But conversely, and my next book, America's Lost Generation, is about this, especially for those of us who graduated during the Great Financial Crisis. I have seen this economy leave behind smart, brilliant, capable people and leave them in the dust. And that, in my mind, is just, and I realize that problem will never probably ever be solved. I get that, but it breaks my heart because in part of the writing of that book, I interviewed a lot of people, and I published their stories in the book. And even the people that are doing well, the stories are still heartbreaking. In the research that I did, the numbers were radicalizing. When you see the data to be kind of like, this is terrible, sort of thing, all this all this stuff, all the zeitgeist, everything that was said, every article that was written, every, all this sort of thing. And I kind of compiled it all together. And I wonder, not just for myself, I wonder for myself, but I also wonder for people, what would our lives have been like if things were different? if we had the economy and the robust business environment and everything that we needed to actually move things forward. Like, my God, how much talent, how much capability, how many wonderful, innovative ideas have been left by the wayside because we have a corporate and employment culture in this country that's optimized for a very narrow set of people. And anyone who doesn't sort of fit in that gets left behind. And it's the unpaid internships. Can't afford to work one? Well, you're done for, sort of thing. It's all these little small barriers that no one really knows about or cares about, but leaves millions of people behind. And if there's one thing, if I could, get a hold of 10 CEOs, I would say, you all have the power to radically change this economy. And if you can reduce the barriers to getting in, to where people that are educated and qualified can get in an entry level job and work up through your organization, like the opportunities our parents had, you will become so stupidly wealthy you can't even imagine. You think you're rich now? I can make you richer by unleashing the talent that you all have spent the last 15 years ignoring. And you will become so stupidly wealthy you won't even know what to do.
So here's the difference between. I completely agree with all the things that you said. There's one difference. I'm saying I don't need those 15 people. I do not need those 15 people. I need you. I need I need all these people that we collectively are smart. We are capable of making choices. We have been trained that those 15 people can make choices for us. And that's it. So they have to change things. That's not true. That is just not true. So I have a philosophy. People say, "Oh, are you an optimist or a pessimist?" I think, or a glass of a glass half empty or a half full. What you see it as if you are an optimist, you see it half full. If you're a pessimist, you see it half empty. What I see it is neither half full or half empty. I see it as an opportunity to fill it up or to throw the poison out of it. I see it as an opportunity. It's not a matter of being optimism. Foolish optimism is just foolish. People say, "Oh, I'm hopeful." Hopeful for what? Hope is not a strategy. A false hope is worse than no hope. A false hope puts our trust in some other thing that we don't know. It's a false hope. I would rather have no hope because then I would begin to say, okay, what do I do with myself? Than having some false hope. My bet, if you and I were betting man, my bet would not be on those 15 people that would do that, or the 100 people. If they wanted, they would have, because they could have.
No, and they didn't. And they didn't. I mean, when I have a chapter in my book called "The Death of the Entry Level Job," and there's been a lot of ink spilled on that subject, and I kind of try to summarize all of that stuff together. No, because it's easier, and you see this all the time. It's easier to cut things, save money, make that next quarterly profit, all this type of thing. They do, it's kind of like, oh yeah, we can, if we cut here, 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 and here, we can make a modest gain. We can post a great profit next quarter and go from there with no thought to the long term. No thought to being like, if you cut that, you're not going to have skilled employees a decade from now. No one cares.
No one cares.
Because
I gave
the
you.
reality is nobody in that C-suite is going to be there in 10 years.
Yeah,
They'll have all
they're packed
retired,
about. They're in Bahamas
moved to,
having Bahamas on their boat.
yes,
They're long gone.
they're not gonna be there in 10 years, so they don't care. And I
So
think that, but the reality is those decisions ripple out because when the big guys start doing it, the small guys start doing it to compete, and then all of a sudden you have, as Gen Z is finding out, you can send out 400 resumes and not get a job.
yeah.
We lived through oh, you're 22 years old, entry level job, but you need 5 years of experience. And that has been a trend that continues to where now Gen Z's grown up to face the same thing. This is not a culture that works for the average person.
You want me to make it even worse? Let me paint the picture for you. I went to USC, University of Southern California. I paid $81 per unit. $81 per unit. That same thing is about $2,500 per unit. Let's say I paid $100. That's 25 times more. I started with two master's degrees with $24,000 in salary. Okay, I'm old. I've been around for a long time. So I have to, if I want to have the same level of standard of living, I have to make 25 times $24,000. That's a lot of money
It is.
for the same amount of money that I've paid for my education in those days. And so, is this right? No, it's not right. But while I have the system that's driving this, if I sit and I say it's not right, it's not. We all know it's not right. Then what? What do we do? Just take it? Yeah, that's one option. My feeling is that if
Well, I think
people
a lot of people are
realize
giving
that
up
they
and
have a
homesteading and
choice,
doing other things. That's what they're doing.
huh?
I think a lot of people are giving up. They're homesteading, they're
Uh,
doing other things.
yeah,
Gen Z is not going to college in the same number millennials did because they see it for what it is and all this sort of thing. I mean, people do start to make the choices that they have and the options that they do have and do what they can, And I realize that nobody cares for those of us out on the fringes, the fringe cases. No one ever has ever cared about us, and that's fine. But people do make decisions about that, what's effective for them and what works for them and all this sort of thing. But that doesn't cause the systemic change that would make it better for everyone. And that's the part that I concern myself with. And that's what I write about. And that's what I talk a lot about on the show is to say, because I look at that situation and say, it's the bucket that's the problem.
it
It's
is.
not
I
very
I think we
popular.
both.
No one probably really wants to hear it. But I mean, in my mind, I appreciate you talking about individual choice. In my mind, it only goes so far.
So I let's agree to disagree. I like the option of being in control of doing something, and I don't want to delegate that to Elon Musk or God himself. I don't want him
Yeah.
to fire 50% of the federal employees because he thinks it's Twitter. I mean, we're gambling with our future. And nobody is saying that. And the fact of the matter is 70 million of us voted for this situation. Why? Because a lot of them feel the same way. A lot of they're trying to figure something out. And they think that some a-hole with $350 billion of wealth is going to care about one of those 100. There's 2.5 million employees, federal employees. You think that he cares about 1 million people being out of a job? He doesn't give a hoot.
No.
So, but we think that he would come and fix us. He wouldn't come and fix us. We have to fix us. Why can we do it? Because we have done it over 10,000 years. We have cleansed up. We have. How did we become America? You think if we didn't do what they did, if the fathers, the Adams of the world and others didn't take up and stand up and that, what would happen? We would still be part of Britain and we would pay taxes to those guys. It would be the same thing. My hope is, and this is the thing, I don't trust that it would come from top to bottom. So that gives me one choice: from bottom up.
Well, yes, and let's face it, most people aren't going to wait around for top-down change because it takes a long time. You can wait a long time for that type of change to happen. And ask anybody who's lived in an authoritarian regime or immigrants escaping
Yeah.
terrible situations. Those situations can be intractable for decades. Um, and so, yeah, and a lot of people, move to this country to get out of those spaces and places in order to thrive and all this sort of thing. Yeah, it just seems, I don't know. It all, and perhaps this is my own personal bias showing through. It all just seems so impossible now, you know. Maybe I've been in the game for too long, you know. And have
Can I
watched
can
the
I ask can I ask you? We've all been in the game, in our own game, too long, and we do get biased, and there is a difference between being biased because of our experience, and being judgmental and judging. Okay, there is a difference. Judgmental means we introduce biases into our conclusions. But judgment means, okay, this is tall, this is short, this is long, this is. If you make yourself the judge of your own argument and say, are they going to do it? I would guarantee you, you're going to come to an answer that no, they will never do it. And if you say, okay, I believe that we deserve more as human beings, we deserve more, every one of us, and we should get more, then what is the choice? And if you have come up with a better choice, I would be the first one to listen and follow you.
I mean,
But
I
we agree
think
that the system is broken.
yes. I mean, I think part of it is, and this is something I've been very disappointed in. I mean, I think a lot of it is really breaking the back of corporate power in this country. Citizens United was devastating. Is money is speech? I don't think so. I mean, the level of corporate capture of government is in the extreme. I think you start with things like that. I think you start with, as FDR did, deciding that there's a minimum by which people should not fall into enacting that in legislation. I think, politically speaking, not voting for any candidate that's not on a certain set of political program, I think is very important. And really forcing the politician's hand on this and getting them to not listen to their donors and more to the people.
Let's
Now,
limit how much politician can get. There's only 3 months
yes,
you can do, and like some European countries, you can get $54,000. That's it. That's all you've got, and you have
yeah,
72 hours on TVs, equal time, equal. That's it. You can't get $16 billion. That's it.
and I think that's a significant portion of fixing American politics
Yeah.
is putting in those. And the sad thing is, we used to have a lot of that in this country. We've consciously gotten rid of it to give power to certain people. I think you start with things like that. I think agitating for that is important um a vitally important thing in terms of changing the system. But when it comes to the individual level of what are you going to do with your life, what finds meaning, how are you going to afford to survive and all this type of thing, then I do agree with you. I think people look at the options they have, they choose the best ones that they have, and they go forward from there. I always joke with my friends and family. A lot of people think the way I've lived my life is by design, and it's not. All I've done is chosen the least bad of the not great options. That's it. That's all I've done. I never had great options, so I just chose the least bad of the options that I got. Unfortunately, that's led me here, for better or for worse. Um, that is, we've done what we've done. Has it been the tremendous success that I thought it would be? No. Do I have as many viewers of this show as I would like to? Not even close. Do I begin to hope to make the money that most of my friends do because they're head and shoulders more successful than I am? Absolutely not. Um,
Has
do
the
I
game
keep
ended?
do I
Has the
keep
game
just
ended, Cam?
soldiering on every day trying to figure it out? Also, yes. It's a quite sad it's a quite sad situation. It's a quite sad situation. And I think a lot of people, whether they're conscious of it or not, and I think one of the reasons why there's a lot of economic unhappiness among people my age, people younger, is we've this drama that's played out in my life has played out in the lives of many other people. They've watched their friends get ahead and leave them behind, or they've raced ahead of other friends that they've forgotten about. All this type of thing. There's been a lot of ink spilled about that. And I think this sort of thing is people are, I think, have woken up to the fact this system doesn't work and it's incredibly unfair and it's time to change it.
I
Yeah.
agree. Time to change it.
All right. Well, we're way over time.
And
So,
I enjoyed the back and forth, Cameron.
well, thank you. So why don't you tell us about where we can find you online and maybe pick up some of those books you mentioned?
Sure. My last name is Mohasseb, as you can see it on the screen, or if you can't see it on the screen, it's mohasseb.com. Is my site, and my first name and last name is my email address. My books are on Amazon. You can find them under my name, and if you so desire, you could pick them up. They're in all sorts of different forms. And I'm actually starting an academy beginning of January with this idea that we've been talking about, that I do believe that it's the time for, hey, you do one, two, three, and you're becoming a, we've become a how to culture. Do one, two, three, and you become a trillionaire, and do one, two, three. Well, and that's nonsense. Unless we realize that each one of us are unique, and we have our paths, and we have choices. There's lots of ways of building our own next best version, and maybe this best version isn't something that somebody else would like, but as long as I'm satisfied, then I've accomplished. And this success measures that we're putting on, this box that we've been imposed on, one step at a time, we can find our next best version, and that's all we could do. And tomorrow we'll look up for the next best version. So that's the academy, and it's going to be coming soon. It's going to be called the Anabasis Academy. And again, if you send me an email, I'll be happy to send you stuff. And the first 1,000 people have been sponsored. There's no fee.
That's fantastic. All right. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. And yeah, we'll check you out there.
My pleasure, Cameron.
That's all for this episode of the Cameron Journal podcast. Thank you so much for listening. Visit us online at CameronJournal.com. We're on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and I love to talk to my followers and listeners, so please feel free to get us on social media at Cameron Cowan on Twitter, and we'll see you next time on the Cameron Journal podcast.